Allahu Akbar.
Store is going to open up? When's our Starbucks going to open up so we can get some drinks, you know? When are restaurants allowed to have people dine in? So we're just constantly waiting and waiting and seeing what the next step is going to be, right? So moving on, the word patience also means sabr in Arabic, right? And it is spread throughout the Quran and Sunnah. And roughly it is mentioned about like 100 times in the Quran itself, just about sabr. So it is one of the most important commandments that we need to grasp ourselves, you know, as Muslims. So look at this month of Ramadan, right? What are we being tested with? We're being tested with sabr. Our Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam said that the month of fasting is the month of sabr. And there's also a mention that half of fasting is half of patience. Or half of patience. So like 50% of what we're doing right now is pretty much just patience, right? We're fasting throughout the whole day and we're just waiting for that time that iftar comes so we can eat that samosa or we can eat whatever we have been craving the whole day. So throughout the whole month, we have been controlling ourselves, refraining from the two most important things we need, food and water. And also, we're being patient. So being patient is part of being a believer in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And there are many stories about the prophets in the Quran about that too, right? One quick example of that is when Prophet Ibrahim alayhi salam, he was patient when he sacrificed his son Ismail. Another example, more popular one maybe, is about Prophet Yusuf's patience, alayhi salam, right? Remember, he was thrown down in a well, and he was in that well for 3 days. You know, he couldn't do much in those 3 days, right? But he had patience, and after those 3 days, he was let out of the well. And you have to think about his father at that time, Prophet Yaqub alayhi salam, right? He also showed a great deal of patience, right? A little background about that story is when Prophet Yusuf alayhi salam's brothers threw him in the well, right? And had that evil plan to get rid of him because they wanted to get more love from their father at that time. When they returned home to try to tell his father what happened to Yusuf, Prophet Yaqub alayhi salam, right, knew right away that something was a little fishy. Like he didn't believe. Now, nothing really added up, right? But he responded with something so beautiful, and that was patience is beautiful. So a way to seek help from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is really through two things, which one is patience that we're talking about, and the other one is prayer. You know, like, alhamdulillah, like this Ramadan kind of went by fast. And that's kind of like a trend we feel like we're seeing. Every month, it just seems to go by fast and fast, right? And we don't know where the time went, right? So oftentimes, we're just waiting for the next Ramadan to come, right? Like we're showing a great deal of patience until the next Ramadan comes, inshallah. And then we kind of look back again at the stories of the prophets in our Quran, and we see how they mastered the art of patience. And there are a lot of stories that you can look, and all of them shows how patient they were, and how they got through almost anything, you know. So moving on, we'll talk about the three types of sabr. So the first type of sabr is the face of a calamity. So calamity kind of means like a disaster or something that happened that you really cannot control, right? You know, an example of that could be a car accident. You know, you didn't know like a car accident was going to happen. You didn't know maybe somebody cut you off or something happened and you got in a car accident, right? Another example is like a death of a loved one, right? Oftentimes when you hear that, what is the first thing that you do to the family or to someone that you know, that someone's like friend or family that passed away, right? You asked Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to give them patience and sabr to go through this hard time of difficulty, right? And another example could be like you're playing a game of football, right? And like you break your arm, right? That's an unfortunate event. That's a calamity. And at the same time, there's a big process. After you break your arm, there's rehab, there's surgery, and then it takes a long time to get back to playing, right? So with this act, you kind of have to act a little responsible and kind of see what the situation is and act the best upon it, inshallah. So that would be the first category of sabr. So the second category would be to restrain ourselves from committing sins. And that is fighting the temptation to commit that sin, right? That food in front of you that we're not allowed to eat, it can be right there, and that could be tempting for you, right? Maybe it's a pepperoni pizza and like nobody is around the room, right? And you'll be like, oh well, like how about let's try it, right? But no, that's when you're restraining yourselves from committing these sins, right? And like even right now, we're kind of in a state of isolation already. So we're kind of accustomed to being a little bit of alone, right? So you can also have that temptation to be watching something you don't want to be watching, right? But you have to remember to restrain yourselves from these types of actions, right? In the second category, pretty much to sum it up, it's like you have the will to do the sin, but sabr comes in and restrains yourself. So the third type is to restrain yourself from permissible things and put yourself into the worship of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, be extra patient as you worship him, right? Like when you make salah, you shouldn't be rushing it in 1 minute, right? You should be taking your time in your salah. And another thing is like taking your time with dhikr and making dua, right? You want to be as sincere as you can to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Be patient through the process that you're going through while you're making that dua, right? Like praying 5 times a day, that's a sign of patience. Fasting is a sign of patience. You want to know why? Because you're withholding and restraining yourself in order to do those good deeds. So to kind of sum up the 3 types of sabr, the first one is a sabr in the face of a calamity. Second one is to restrain ourselves from committing the sin. And the third one is to restrain yourself from permissible things and put yourself into the worship of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in Surah Mudaththir tells the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam that be patient for the sake of your Lord. So being patient for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is a part of our iman. Sabr and iman, they go hand in hand, right? If you have iman, you will have sabr, and one does not go without the other. And if you are seeking guidance through patience, it will help you immensely. Like I mentioned before, we take our time with our salah, we take our time with our dua, right? And there should never ever be a rush in pleasing Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And if there's a time that you start to lose a little bit of your patience, or you're starting to just lose patience in general, one thing would be to go back to this ayah, to be patient just for the sake of your Lord, right? So, like again, we wait in those long lines to get our food. We order something online and we're waiting for that new iPhone or new gadget you want to get to arrive, right? And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, he will be happy if you show patience, especially through difficulties that we go through, right? There's this one takeaway you can get from this, which is if you have patience to wait for something you really like because it satisfies you and makes you happy, you have the ability to have patience for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, to make Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala happy. And that's where you get rewarded immensely as well. So patience also applies to the right of people just as it applies to the rights of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. For as we should be patient with the people when they hurt us and sin against us. So in this case, it's kind of like you're being the bigger person in a situation, right? If there's a situation between 2 people, right, and there's arguments going back and forth, like it's better to just kind of let that go, right? And even better, if there's a situation between 2 people, it's just better to like let that situation go, so both of you guys will not have to deal with that and will have sabr for each other. Like again, people can go weeks with arguing about things, but it's just better to kind of like forgive and forget and just handle that situation in a better way, right? Another thing is like sometimes sabr could be difficult, right? That's why another concept of sabr is to withhold. And that's not like you're taking any action, yet you're refraining yourself to do some actions, right? It was kind of like one of the second sabr that we mentioned, right? It's like, for an example, if you're running late to something, right? let's say you're on your way to a store because like you're running late for something, but it's like you see like the traffic is slow, and then you know it's rush hour or something, right? So you know that it's going to take a little bit of time to get there, but you're refraining yourself from maybe possible road rage or possibly like yelling outside the car or something. But it's kind of like you have to refrain yourself from that. So like oftentimes it's the other way around. Let's use a little example. You order something off Amazon, free shipping, and it says it will be here in 3 days. 3 days goes by, nothing comes, right? You check your doorstep, your box isn't here. At the same time, you're checking online, like, where's my package? And it's saying it's still being shipped. It seems like a little act, right? Like maybe most of us will be like, oh man, it'll eventually come. But what if what if that little action makes you get like mad, or you're just starting to get a little bit more aggressive? Like, oh man, this isn't coming. Like, why is it coming? You're just getting mad. You can punch the wall or something. You have to kind of refrain from those actions, and that gets very dangerous. Losing patience starts triggering yourself to do things you might actually not want to do, right? And that's just one example, but there's many other ways that like you see in your everyday life that can happen. And the best thing would be to stop before it gets worse. So, like I mentioned before, patience is a very important action to apply in our lives, right? We've mentioned many stories before. There's told over 100 verses in the Quran about sabr. So according to the Hadith of the book of Tirmidhi, the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam said that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, if I take away the two pearls from the believers, his eyes, and he becomes blind and remains patient, at that, then I have no reward lesser for him than Jannah itself. Now kind of ponder about that situation, right? Losing your eyes, not having any eyes. You know, there are people that are blind out there, and think about how much patience those people go through, right? Crossing the street isn't going to be something like we're accustomed to, right? It's going to take them more time and more energy to go through that, because obviously they don't know if the sign is to, or if the sign is to walk or not to walk, right? And like in this hadith, right? Like if you have patience for that, like the reward is so powerful, right? Like Jannah, that like the end goal that we're trying to all achieve, inshallah. So the reward, again, like it's so much beneficial for us. And if you have sabr, nobody can destroy you. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is going to be on your side through that. So when you have sabr, you will get Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's reward. And also when you have sabr, you not only will get his reward, but you'll get Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's blessings, and you will get Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's help. And this is kind of why we seek sabr through, or we seek help through patience and sabr. So now we kind of talked about what sabr is, kind of some examples, general examples of what patience are, right? But again, there's also some positives that goes into patience, and there's also some negatives that goes into the idea of being patient. And we can kind of talk about some examples and maybe something we can do to try to take for it so that can benefit maybe one of you, inshallah. So sometimes we get impatient because things aren't going as planned, right? But we also need to remember that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, he is the best of planners. So in this case, the best advice to go through a situation like this would probably be the best, like do whatever you can to the best of your abilities, right? Whatever your true intentions were to getting that event planned or something, like those are going to be your intentions. But as long as you do the best of your ability, it will all run smoothly. And at the end of the day, sometimes you can just take a little lesson from that, and even next time you can expand more on what you're doing. Another issue is kind of like another subject, right, which I wanted to talk about, was time awareness. So like if you're in a rush, sometimes we're in a rush, we can't get 5 minutes to go pick up something for your mom, or you can't stop for like 5 minutes to do something, right? And that goes under the category of time management. And that's another topic that you can correlate with patience, right? Sometimes you don't have patience because you just don't have enough time to do something. And then in that case, like, you should manage your time a little bit more wisely. That spread your day out better, so like you don't have to rush through a few of the items that you want to do, right? And you don't want to rush to get everything to fit in your schedule as well. Then it's going to be more hectic, right? And another thing you can do is like do not rush anything you're doing, because mistakes will happen. You know, when I was in school, right, our teachers, if it was an exam day, right, our teachers were saying that please take your time on the exam and double check your work, right? Take that advice and take that advice in your real world life as well, right? Like one feeling that's not good is when you get your exam back and like you went through it, right, and there was like a little error that you did, like you said 2 instead of 3 because you were just doing that exam too fast, right? You With everything you're doing, it's going to take patience. So just do what you're doing at a good pace. Don't rush through it, and inshallah, like that, whatever you were planning to do will go smoothly. And another thing about patience is that you need to also put in like the work and effort while you're going through something as well, right? You can't just sit around and then like in 2 months or saying like you get what you want because you haven't been doing anything, right? It's like you have to have patience, but there's also the work that you put in to do something, right? Like a real life example is you go to college, right? You're not going to get your degree in like a month if you're just like sitting around and just like patiently waiting for that degree. No, you take your classes, you take your classes you need for the degree, right? And after the degree, you go through the process of getting a job, right? Going through interviews and this is all pretty much a process that you apply in life, right? So I'm like a very, very huge sports fan, right? And I can kind of give that same example in the world of sports, right? So I'll do that next. So in the last 5 years, the Golden State Warriors have won 3 of the NBA championships, right? But when those guys like Steph Curry, Klay Thompson, Jeremiah Green came to the team, they weren't as good, right? But they developed those players. Those players developed their game. They got better each time, and then all of it now they're like championship contenders. Not this year, but at least a few years before. But it took a process of the whole team learning the game of basketball together to get to that final stage, which was winning an NBA championship. I'm a huge Lakers fan, and it's been quite a while since we made the playoffs, right? And that's something us Laker fans are accustomed to, right? But then one off season, after failing to get a top free agent every year, we got LeBron James. You know, after we got LeBron James, the next offseason we got Anthony Davis. And now because of going through all the team and cutting some salaries and players leaving, open up space to get these players. And now we clinched the playoffs, right? Like pre-COVID-19, obviously. And now just patiently waiting for the NBA season to resume. So hopefully the Lakers have the chance to win that Larry O'Brien trophy. So to conclude with this, I hope that you understand a little bit of what patience is, what the word patient means, and the types of sabr that were mentioned, right? I hope that you can use the Quran and Sunnah as a source of motivation and inspiration for you guys. And I hope that there was some advice kind of mentioned towards the end that you can use as well. And we know that we're kind of almost at the end of Ramadan, right? And like these last few days, we should be benefiting a lot from these last few days, right? So my last thought also is like, it takes time learning the concept of patience, right? I'm still trying to learn that concept every single day. And it's just a whole process that you're going to go through in life, right? There's going to be some obstacles you're going to go through, and then you're going to have to be patient or just go around it, right? But remember what the reward is for patience, right? And you always need to know that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is right by your side to get through this as well. So that's kind of like the little intro to the virtue of patience, talking about what it is, because that's like our theme of the Qiyam tonight. So we ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to give us sabr and patience for everything we go to. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to make the last few nights of Ramadan the most beneficial as we can. And we ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to forgive us for our shortcomings and to make us even closer to Him. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم والعصر إن الإنسان لفي خسر إلا الذين آمنوا وعملوا الصالحات وتواصوا بالحق وتواصوا بالصبر. Amen. So Jazakallah khair, and that was my little intro to patience.